Hi everyone, this is Spring, the fiber enthusiast, coming back with another knitting tutorial. Today's tutorial is going to be on a basic knitted hat using the magic loop. So some items that you're going to want to get together is, of course, a pair of scissors and a darning needle or some type of needle to weave in your ends. Some way to keep count of your rows, especially when you get to the decreasing section. So a row counter of sorts. That can be one that slides along on your knitting needle, or one that hangs, or just a piece of paper and a pen to tick off how many rows you're at. You're going to need how many ever stitch markers, just an arrangement of stitch markers. I usually grab a handful and use what I need, out of the handful. There's different kinds. I make personally these kinds here. So these are removable, like progress keepers, that I can use on my knitting needles or on crocheted items as stitch markers, or even just hook in a stitch and keep it as a progress keeper. I also make these knitting, so they actually are fixed rings, so they go on your knitting needles and slide along as you go. Very similar to these, which are perfectly fine as well. Or you could use something like this. It also works as a progress keeper, a stitch marker, or can fit on most knitting needles. Okay, so just grab you a handful of some type of knitting stitch markers, or if you wanted to, you actually can, and some people do this. I'll show you real quickly. Some people just take a small little thing of yarn and tie a knot into the end, leaving a circle like such. And you want it to be a different color than the yarn that you're using, and then they just slide it onto their knitting needle and pass it along just like a stitch marker. So if that's all you have, that's all you have. It's not that big a deal. For this tutorial, I am going to be using one needle size and one needle size only. I will be using a 5mm knitting needles, also known as a size 8. Get in camera here. This is the one that I was in, so you can see. Okay, you're going to want your cord to be a rather long cord for using as the magic loop, because you're going to have half of your hat stitches on one side and half of your hat stitches on the other side. You're going to need to be able to have a loop down at one end and a loop. So say we go like this, we're working on this side. You're going to have a loop on this side of the half, and you will have a loop on this side of the half. So you're going to want to make sure that your cord is long enough to do that. And again, it is a 5mm US size 8. I'm going to be using a worsted Aran weight, 4 weight. This is Red Heart with Love. Holly Berry is the color. You do not have to use this yarn. You can use any 4-weight yarn you choose. And the first thing we're going to do is a long tail cast on of 80 stitches. Go ahead and do your cast on how you so choose of 80 stitches, and once you have gotten there, I will meet back up with you. If you need to know how to do a cast on, you can go to my knitting stitches tutorials, and I will put a hyperlink either here or at the end of the video to that section that shows you how to cast on. All right, I'll be back after I have cast on 80 stitches. Okay, so now that you have your 80 cast on stitches, what I generally like to do is just gently tie a knot with what's left of my cast on tail and my working yarn, just to give it a little stability to start with. And when I was casting on at the 40 stitches mark, I went ahead and placed a stitch marker just so I could go straight to it. You don't have to do that, but all in all, we're going to divide our stitches evenly on the cable. So here's my stitch marker where I was at the middle of the 80 stitches, so at my 40th stitch. All I'm going to do is fold that cable over right there in that area, and I'm going to kick those stitches half on each side, just like such. And now I'm going to go ahead and pull that excess cable up into them stitches, and that's what it should look like at this point. Okay. With your working yarn on your back needle, you're going to hold your needles facing from left to right. Let's go ahead and scooch all these stitches down on the needle so that way we can make sure that everything is in sync. Okay, so we need to turn these stitches. This is the biggest thing when you get started working in the round on anything crocheted or knitted. Make sure that all of your stitches are lined up correctly and all facing the same direction. That will keep you from being twisted. Okay, now that I have that situated, I'm going to go ahead and pull my back needle out of those stitches and creating a loop on my right hand side as well as a loop on my left hand side, making sure that I don't twist any of these stitches. Your working yarn is always going to come between these needles to work in the round. Okay, scooting your stitches down towards the end of your needle, we are going to begin connecting in the round. So we're going to knit the first 2 stitches. Make sure when you knit that first stitch and pull it off, you cinch down that first stitch. Otherwise, you will have a gap here, right there. So go ahead and knit the second one. Move your yarn to the front and purl the next 2. We're going to do this 2x2 ribbing all the way around. Knit 2, purl 2. You just have to scoot your stitches down as you need. Knit 2, and purl 2. Knit 2, purl 2. I'll do this first half with you, show you how to transfer, and let you do the second half on your own. So that was purl 2. Now we're going to knit 2, purl 2. Remember, purling is just a reverse knit stitch. When we get back around to the beginning, we'll place a marker. That way we know the beginning of the rounds. Purl 2. So if you're following along with me, your last 2 stitches on the first half should be purls. Okay. So now with your yarn between your needles still, turn your work over. I'm going to remove that stitch marker from there, from between my 2 sets of 40. Because I'm going to replace it and put it in the beginning. Okay. So now what we're going to do is pull that cable up into and needle up into the next half of stitches. Make sure you keep everything aligned where your stitches are all facing the right direction. And pull your back needle out. Again, leaving enough room for a loop on both the right and the left. Aligning your stitches, make sure they're all correct. Our last 2 stitches were purls. That means we start with the knit stitch. So we're going to knit 2 first. And always, always, that very first stitch, each time you start a new side, make sure you tighten it down once you have taken it off your needle. Otherwise, it will be really big holes. Okay, and purl the next 2. So continue on. Your last 2 stitches should be purl stitches. Continue on across this second half of stitches, knitting 2 and purling 2. I'll check back with you when I have finished this row. Okay, so I'm coming up to my last 2 stitches, and they are purl stitches. Go ahead and purl those. And again, turn your work. Your working yarn is between your needles and up and over. Okay, I'm going to slide these next row of stitches up onto my needle here. Get prepared to work. I want to place a stitch marker showing that this is now the beginning of our round. Going to pull that back needle out, placing a loop on either side of our work, and begin our next round. You are going to do 10 rounds exactly the same. Knit 2, purl 2 by 2 ribbing. Once you have completed your 10 rounds of 2 by 2 knitting, I will meet back up with you. Okay, so I have done my 10 rounds of 2 by 2 ribbing for the brim of the hat. Now the next phase is really simple. You are just simply going to knit both sides all the way around every round until your hat measures roughly 6 inches. Now this could change. The best thing to do, if you are making this hat for you, let me go ahead and put a stitch marker in the middle here so I can know where my middle is. When you're working on a long cord like this, this is so great for testing to see if the hat is big enough. So just slide the hat all the way back down onto your cable, and that gives you room to actually put this on your head. So if you're making this for you, which this is an adult size, set this on top of your head just like that. And what you want to do is basically go until you get to where your head starts to curve at the crown, and that's where you start your decreases. So mine, when I do mine, I measure mine out to approximately 6 inches from the edge of the brim. So I'll take my measuring tape, I'll place it at the end, the edge of the brim, and I usually stop right about 6 inches of knitting. So from wherever your 10 rows are, all the way up is knitted, and then we start the decreases. It's that simple. I will be back with the decreases in as soon as I finish my 6 inches total here. And see, with me putting that stitch marker there, I can just automatically pull it back through, and it's back to being 40 stitches on each side. Okay, so yeah, you're just going to continue on like you've been doing, sliding that front needle in, pulling the back one out so you have a loop on both sides. And now just knit every single stitch all the way around. Just knit like this. And like I say, if you're following along with me, I do have a rather large head. I got a big head. I go 6 inches from the edge of the brim, from the starting edge of the brim to where I start decreasing. So I will see you when we get to that point. Okay, so we are getting ready to start decreasing. And I am almost at 6 inches from where I am now to the bottom of my brim, to the very start of this hat. So here's what we're going to do. Continue working the same as you have been, sliding your work up onto that front needle with your yarn coming from the center here, over the top, a loop on both sides of your work. We are going to knit 8, so counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you're going to knit 2 together. So knitting them 2 together. And placing a stitch marker. Okay, Now, if you want to just count every single time you decrease, that's fine. That's entirely up to you. I personally prefer to have the stitch markers because it gives me the opportunity to not count every single stitch, every decreasing row. So here we go again. You're just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, knit 2 together. This is the repeat all the way around. Knit 2 together and place a stitch marker. Continue working in that pattern all the way around until you have reached the other end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, knit 2 together, place a stitch marker. Do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, knit those last 2 together, and place a stitch marker. Turn your work over. Pull your now front needle into your work and continue the same process on this side as you just did on that side. I've come to the last 2 stitches. That is a knit 2 together. I'm going to go ahead and knit them 2 together. And I'm not placing a stitch marker here because this is the beginning and end of our work, so there's already a stitch marker there. And for this case, I have a different type of stitch marker, so that way I know that that is the end of my work. Now I'm going to turn the work over, and round 2 of the decrease is very simple. You're going to knit all stitches. So go ahead and set up to knit all stitches with your front needle into your work and a loop on both sides, bringing your working yarn from the center out through the top. Go ahead and knit all stitches, and I will meet up with you when we get back to the end. Okay, now that you have knitted round 2 of the decreasing, we're going to decrease on this round, round 3. Knit 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And if you have placed stitch markers, you will notice that it is 2 before your next stitch marker. Knit those 2 together and slip the stitch marker as you come to it. Just like such. And that is your decrease round 3 is knit 7, knit 2 together. We'll do it one more time together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And again, we are 2 stitches before our stitch marker. You knit them 2 together. Slip your stitch marker as you come to it. Okay, So you're going to continue that all the way around until you have come to the end. Then you're going to knit the next round. Round 4 is a knit round. And we will continue this process, and I will put all of the rounds of the decreasing round right here. There is 15 rounds total for the decreasing round until you have to sew in the ends and close up the top of your hat. I will also put it in the description box, and it will be just the decreasing rounds. Again, this is just a basic hat on a magic loop. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all 15 rounds of decrease, knit, decrease, knit, decrease, knit. Okay, so we are on our last decrease round before we remove from our needles. And this is a knit 1, knit 2 together round. So knit 1. And then knit those last 2 stitches you have there together. And here is where I drop my stitch markers off as I come to them. I just remove them since this is the last round. Knit 1 and knit 2 together. Remove that stitch marker. Knit 1 and knit 2 together. Remove that stitch marker. Knit 1 and knit 2 together. Okay, that's it for that side. I'm going to remove the next stitch marker, turn our work over, slide the front needle down into the work, slide the back needle out and bring it around ready to work. And let's start again. Knit 1 and knit 2 together. Remove that stitch marker. Knit 1 knit 2 together. Remove the stitch marker. Knit 1 knit 2 together. Remove that stitch marker. And the last 3 stitches, knit 1 and knit 2 together. At this point, you can go ahead and remove your main stitch marker, showing the beginning and the end. Now is when you need to get your needle and your scissors out. You're going to want to cut about a 6-inch tail, 6-8 inches. Turn your work over. Slide that front needle down into your work. Go ahead and pull that back needle out. We will not be using the back needle. We are going to be using our darning needle. Go ahead and thread your darning needle with the tail that you have cut, the remaining yarn tail. And now we're going to slide our stitches off of our needle onto our yarn tail. And we're going to do this knit-wise. So just as if you were going to knit these stitches, you're going to insert your darning needle from left to right on the front leg of that stitch. And you're going to do that with every stitch all the way around. Just like such. What that is doing is creating the last round of knit stitches. Okay, turn your work over and pull your darning needle through so that way it doesn't lose them stitches. And pull your front needle into your work and continue the same process on this side. Just as if you were to knit, you're slipping those stitches off onto your darning needle. There we go. Pull the darning needle and your yarn tail through. And now you can set your knitting needles aside. What I generally do here is I stick my hand inside the hat to the opening at the top. I place my darning needle through that opening and turn the hat inside out. And now I grab it by the side from the bottom to the center. We can pull that center tight and crisscross back and forth across that center hole that we just closed up. You're just going to crisscross back and forth. And towards the third or fourth time of crisscrossing, we're going to start placing a double wrap around the needle. 1, 2. And what that'll do is kind of hold that yarn in place once you've given it a good strong tug and tightened it down. And now just weave in through a few stitches on the back. Like this. Cut the excess of your yarn tail off. And now the top of your hat is sewed together and all closed. Now the final step is to sew in the beginning yarn end here. And that will be the end of the hat. Okay, so here is your finished hat. It is knitted magic loop. Again, I will add the 15 round decrease to the top of the hat down in the description box. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up and let me know down in the comment section. Be blessed and be a blessing. Bye, guys.